think with me about your favorite holiday traditions and memories around food. Maybe it's Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving, maybe it's Christmas or New Year's Eve, but I'm guessing something pretty quickly came to your mind. And I imagine many of you are not only picturing the Thanksgiving turkey and the mashed potatoes or the green beans, but also the way the food is prepared and the people who help make it. All of these factors contribute to the traditions and memories around it. Maybe if your aunt doesn't bring her legendary key lime pie, it just isn't Easter. Or it could be the family lore of retelling the same stories year after year. In our family, it's the need to soak the lutefisk the night before Christmas. First of all, so no one dies eating it, but also to collectively complain about this gelatinous fish's smell and then to tease my husband for hanging on to this tradition. When we celebrate traditions, we remember the experience around the food, but we also remember the things we do together, the people who are with us, the things that brought us to this place year after year. These things that we do to keep traditions and memories alive, and the reasons we have those traditions in the first place, that all comes to the forefront here in chapters 11 and 12 in the book of Exodus. If you'll remember, the Egyptian people under the rule of ruthless Pharaoh, they have just suffered through some ugly plagues. From the water that became blood to the death of the livestock to the swarms of bugs to the darkness, there was a whole lot of destruction. And yet we hear that Pharaoh's heart continues to harden. So chapter 11, it begins with a lengthy warning. As if the first 9 plagues weren't enough, the Lord speaks through Moses to say, hey, something really terrible is going to happen. Every firstborn in the land of Egypt is going to die. And it's not just the firstborn of those slaves who Pharaoh has been tormenting. It's the firstborn of Pharaoh himself. It's the firstborn of the livestock. It's dramatic and it's terrifying. And yet in verse 9, we hear that God knows what's going to happen. Pharaoh is going to refuse to listen. God knew that Pharaoh would be resistant, but God still gave him chances to change his mind. And eventually, as we might have predicted, this ruthless leader reaches the point of no return. As readers in this descriptive story of Exodus, we know what's coming next. We can predict it. We've seen this pattern of warning, destruction, heart hardening in the chapters before. But then we have this moment in the story to pause. In chapter 12, we learn about something called the Passover. See, God, he tells Moses and Aaron that every Israelite should sacrifice a lamb. Not just any lamb, it needs to be a 1-year-old male lamb without blemish. And these Israelites, they should take the blood of this lamb and put it above their doors and on either side of the door. And then we hear these very specific instructions about when and how they should eat this lamb with something called unleavened bread. And at midnight, just as Moses and Aaron reported to Pharaoh, God's going to pass over the land, but when God sees the blood on the door, God will pass over those homes. And none of the firstborn children in these homes will die. The Israelites who honor this sign will not be affected by this plague. And maybe you're reading this and you're thinking, it's all kind of strange. These descriptions of blood on the door, of cooking and eating and preparing this food. But it's important for us to read this through the eyes of the Israelites. They would have all been wondering this whole time what would be happening to them next as they watched this destruction. And that's, importantly, when we hear in verse 14, "This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a long-lasting ordinance." This day of Passover is meant to be a time where you remember. This isn't a one-and-done type of celebration. It's something that generation upon generation is going to repeat. It's God's reminder that connecting your past is important to your present, and it's important to your future as well. And we read that the plague, it does come over the land, killing the firstborn children of the Egyptians. And then they cannot kick the Israelites out fast enough. Go worship your God, Pharaoh says. Go to the wilderness. Go anywhere but here. You'll read another description of the Passover at the end of chapter 12. And a lot of scholars believe this is a merging of two scripts. But whoever wove this moment of pause into Exodus was clear. The celebration of Passover is not just about food. For our brothers and sisters who are of the Jewish faith, they still celebrate Passover today, and it is about remembering what God did for the ancient Israelites. It's about remembering how God showed justice and mercy to God's faithful people, and it helps us remember what God has done for us today. So here are a couple of questions for you as you read chapters 11 and 12. Number 1, what holiday traditions do you celebrate? And what do they help you remember? And number 2, where have you experienced God's faithfulness in the past? And how does that shape you today? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are looking for all of the resources and the videos that accompany this study, be sure to visit our website, calvaryalex.org/study.